Hello to everybody. It's been a real long time. This is Ron Zeev speaking, and to my left is Moshe Chertoff, the man and the legend. And here we are. It's been a very long time since we've come together to talk about what's going on here in Israel. Because of various reasons going around the country. I left the country for a while, came back, visited your beautiful country, and
which is that?
Which is Clarksdale, Mississippi, the Blues Fest. And we're back, and wanted to give everyone at least a little bit of an update about what's going on. So let's dive right into it.
Hi, everybody.
Moshe, why don't you give a little bit of an update? What's been going on with Benjamin Netanyahu and his government's siege on Israeli democracy? What's going on with that? Is there any up to date?
Oh, there's so much up to date. You could make a college course out of it. We're talking about the legislative blitz and everything that's surrounding it, because first of all, everyone should understand that it's not only what you're seeing in the news about the legislative blitz. That's kind of the smokescreen for the reality, which I've heard a lecture about this from a former minister in the Israeli government. And I think he's right. He's talking about two main objectives here: that the whole judicial reform, as they call it, that whole thing is kind of a smokescreen for the two main issues. And the two main issues are, number one, keeping Netanyahu out of the courts and therefore out of jail, because that is a very decent likelihood it could happen. And number two, to be able to complete a total control of the West Bank, making it almost impossible for there ever to rise up and create a Palestinian state. So you've noticed in the past that there's been extreme violence on the West Bank since this whole thing began a few months ago, and that's not coincidental. It's part of the plan. And so in the meantime, you can come off sounding very, very strong in your rhetoric, and you explain to everyone that these are your real desires, when in actuality, you're expecting them to fight back, and you say, well, you see, I'm going halfway for you. I'm going to be liberal about this. I'm not going to push everything that I said in the beginning, because I'm taking you into consideration also, when that is not the case at all.
Well, but you notice that the bottom line is, of late, first of all, there have been 21 weeks of incredible protests. Consecutive
weeks of protests.
And and things are definitely at a boiling point. But it's interesting that what's your take on the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu has decided to put this on the back burner? At least it seems that way.
That's what he'd want us to believe. What he did was, come holiday time, beginning with Passover and then Israeli Independence Day, but Memorial Day first, Independence Day the next day, which is crazy, but never mind, we're not going to go into that. He wanted to show that he's going to be now more aware of what the public wants, and he's going to be going to be able to, as if it were go halfway with us, so he's going to put it on hold. He didn't put anything on hold. They kept up the rhetoric, they kept up the hatred and the blacklisting of people and pushing their agenda forward the whole time. I think he was hoping that the public would get tired after 16, 17 consecutive weeks of 100 and even 200,000 people protesting per night throughout the country. And he thought that we would kind of say, oh man, this is, I give in. It's just been too long. I can't do this anymore. It's very taxing on our public. People shouldn't think that we're just going to the Dodger Stadium to watch a baseball game. We're going to march in the streets and get pushed and sometimes get attacked and sometimes have police come in and start taking people away for no provocation whatsoever, no breaking of any laws. It's very, very difficult.
But the bottom line is that he has kind of put it onto the back burner. At least it seems that way. And even at the after he passed recently, they passed the budget, which gives them a long period of quiet,
Wow.
at least parliamentary wise. He at the opening statement of the when the government got together again after the budget was passed, he said that our first priority is the high price
Cost of living.
the cost of living in Israel, and that's what we're going to be doing. And the person sitting next to him was actually the architect of the revolution, and everyone kind of sat quietly. So what's your take on that? What's going on?
So first of all, it's not a given that you pass a budget for the country. He didn't do it for 2 years straight before there was the alternative government, and we did it in the first year. For him to be able to pass this budget, he has to satisfy the members of his coalition. Now, the only way he could have created a coalition, any coalition, and let's not forget, he did not win the majority of the Israeli public. He only won 20-some-odd% of the Israeli public voting for him. Then he brought in all of the rest of the extremists to be able to form the 64-seat majority in the Knesset. That's how you form a government. And when you bring in extremists, they have extreme requests, desires. They have their goals. They have to be able to tell their constituents, look, you voted for us because we said this and that, and now you're going to get it. So he had to bow down to some of the most ugly, theocratic, and racist budget that we've ever seen. And if you look back at the tapes before the tapes don't exist, the recordings of Netanyahu before the elections, he didn't mention as one of his first priorities the legislative blitz. He was talking about the cost of living, which was at the top of everybody's issue. Our kids can't afford to buy a home in this country. It's terrible. And we're talking about even by the Lebanese border, it's too expensive, let alone in the center of the country. And then he was talking about the fact that we have no governance in the Negev, where the Bedouin seem to have we've lost all control. They drive through the highways shooting M16s in the air. And there have been until now over 80 citizens, members of the Arab community in Israel, who have been murdered almost entirely by Arabs, and almost none of the cases have been solved. Nobody has been brought to justice. And we know that if one Jewish Israeli gets murdered, it's a matter of within days, they've got a suspect in hand and his trial will go forward. And especially if it's an Arab, quickly.
So logic would.
But I want to finish this idea, and that is that he had to give in to a lot of demands that you look at and you say, what? He gave how many billions of shekels for the improvement of the heritage of East Jerusalem or the tomb of the patriarchs and stuff, which is stuff which eventually we might not have control over if we actually have peace and some of these things go up. But I mean, it was a very sectorial budget where all of his
coalition
partners got what they needed to be able to say, okay, now we can move forward. We'll vote for it.
So why didn't they move forward? That's my question. Okay, logic says, okay, we passed the budget. We got all the billions that we can show our constituents that this is what here's your money. Now we can go back and move forward with our blitz. What happened? Why?
He was hoping that he was counting on the fact that he wouldn't have this kind of objection, this kind of resistance. And it turns out that even members of his own party were saying, wait a second, we won the majority of the seats out of all of this coalition. We should be running the show here. But in essence, there was contortion. What's the wrong word? I've been in Israel too long. He was what's the word, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah.
He was being taken to the bank by his coalition partners, and they got what they needed. And he didn't have what was left over, not only in the budget, in general, in terms of giving out positions as ambassadors or positions as ministers or vice ministers. they gave it away to all of the extremist groups. So you have the foxes guarding the hen house, and you've got Ben Gvir being in charge of the police and being able to create his own a National Guard type unit. Where really, is this the guy we want to give this kind of power to? And he had to do it, because if not, Ben Gvir would say, no, if you don't need me, just let me know. We'll leave the government. Everything's fine. And everybody goes, no, not that. No, wait. We'll talk about it. And so in essence, they took him to the bank. And now he's, for instance, just yesterday, they started business again, and they tried to pass their new additional law. And the law was to make sure that no matter what things are being taken into consideration in any project, the overall and underlying base of it all has to be Zionism. So that in essence, he is trying to put forward an absolute continuation of the nation state law, which was passed not in our government, in the government before that, Netanyahu's previous government, that says, this is the Jewish state. You don't like it, go somewhere else. So we don't have anywhere else to go. So now what does he do? He tries to make the word Zionism a part of everything. And if you're not a Zionist, well, you may not get funding. You may not be able to finish your projects and whatever. And then they threw in addition to that, because he's got ultra-Orthodox members of his coalition, the law of the Torah has to be in everything as an underlying guiding force.
It's interesting that the Orthodox community define themselves as not Zionists.
Yeah.
But they have no, as long as the money keeps flowing, they have no qualms with sitting in a government and supporting laws that say, Zionism is there. They have no qualms with that whatsoever.
Excuse the expression, there are good Arabs and Arabs. There is the same thing here. You can be not Zionist, but if you're Arab, not Zionist, wait a second, are you an enemy of the state? You're a Jewish, not Zionist. Okay, we can deal with that. Don't worry, we'll take care of you.
So I have kind of like this gut feeling that the reason that Netanyahu has decided to kind of slow down this process, at least that is because, first of all, the incredible protest movement that you spoke about before, plus the fact that I think we're seeing also the American government and the European community kind of pushing back a little bit, and I think this is having some influence on him. I think it's important that Benjamin Netanyahu wants very much to get that invitation to come to the White House,
and he hasn't gotten it yet.
And he hasn't gotten it yet. And I think if Biden is giving him the cold shoulder. And I think this is great. And we're kind of, do you think there's more to come as far as pushback from Biden or from the Democrats, especially the Democrats, the progressive Democrats that are going to push their agenda vis-a-vis the Palestinians?
They already are. Sure, they already are, because they're the largest group, the largest caucus in the Democratic Party are the progressives, so it's natural that they would. But here comes an interesting twist in the whole story.
Okay.
We just found out the other day that the Iranians are possibly only a couple weeks away from being ready to start producing nuclear weapons. And now the United States was banking on any kind of action should Iran go ahead with their plan and start creating weapons. Then the idea was to take in both Israel, possibly Saudi Arabia, and other so-called allies of the United States, and then do some sort of a concerted attack where it won't be only the United States by itself. Or here we are, Israel may not be in favor, in other words, in good favor with the United States to be able to pull off a military mission like that. So there's pressure from the one side who are saying, in the United States, who are saying you must stand up against a nuclear Iran. And there's pressure in Israel, which is saying we absolutely must stand up against nuclear Iran. Yet there isn't this unified approach because the United States doesn't approve of anti-democratic and theocratic legislation, which is changing the composure, the entire makeup of Israeli democracy. And when I say Israeli democracy, that might soon be a thing of the past. It depends on what your definition of democracy. There is no single definition. Like, was Trump's reign in the United States a democratic rule to a certain extent, but also not necessarily fully. Other countries may point to the United States and say, democracy? Are you kidding? And black people are being killed by police all over them. You call that a democracy? What's going on here? And all of the problem with gerrymandering and all that stuff. Democracy. So democracy is a relative term, but it's obvious when you start turning into theocracy, and you are a racist theocracy in addition to that, the United States doesn't want to go along with that. So now it's an interesting arm wrestling that's going on. You don't want to lose too fast. You don't want to give in. On the other hand, you don't want to just crush them, because then you become the bad guy also. So this is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. I don't think anybody knows right now. And conditions can change suddenly. Should missiles come flying into Israel, or should our Jewish terrorists in the West Bank perpetrate more horrific? There's been another shooting in the little town of Hawara. Someone was killed. It almost didn't make the news. And they've got pretty much a free hand along there, which is part of that whole idea of dividing up the West Bank so it can't be turned into a Palestinian state.
Let me go back. Let me go back to the protests. There are some people on the right that claim that the protests are becoming diffused. They're all of a sudden we see that there are not only against the making Israel into a dictatorship, which was the big catalyst for getting everyone out there, but now they're talking about a theocratic state. They're talking all kinds of different issues. The fact that the ultra-Orthodox don't serve in the army,
and aren't willing necessarily to go to work, and they're getting
and so
stipends not to go to work.
So the protest movement is kind of dispersing into different
side categories.
All kinds of different categories, and the right are saying that you see, all they're really interested in is getting rid of the government. They're not really interested in our legislative, the judicial reform that we're trying to put through. What's your take on that?
I think it's simplistic to think that we should only be protesting against the judicial reform, that they call it, judicial overhaul, and say, let's just keep our eyes trained on this and let's get that over with. Because in the meantime, we've been at this for how long? 20 weeks? 20 straight weeks of protesting, which is phenomenal.
Going on 21.
Going on 21, and we're talking about having the American equivalent of millions of people in the street every single week. Now, this has been crazy. We did it, Ron and I stood in the rain in Tel Aviv, in a pouring rain. I mean, okay, Israel's a good climate and whatever. It's not that bad to step outside and protest, but we've been doing it for a long time. People have lives. And so to say, wait a second, we'll finish this first, and only then we'll take care of other issues. Well, the occupation's continuing. It's almost every day that a Palestinian is killed. It's almost every day. I won't say that, I'll take that back. Oftentimes there are children, juveniles being arrested. There are people being beaten up, either by Jewish terrorists or sometimes by the security forces, because they're trying to quell an uprising or a backlash from a Jewish terror incident. So the Palestinian community there comes out in force. And so it's an extremely difficult situation. So to bring in, end the occupation, to bring in all of the other issues that face Israeli society and prevent us from moving forward, just the cost of living keeps on going up, and nobody is able to control it, no matter what the Minister of Finance or the governor of the Bank of Israel do. It's still inflating out of control, and the situation is pretty desperate for people who were having a rough time before all of this started, and now prices are skyrocketing. So it's a touchy issue. And I'm familiar with it because I'm also involved in trying to end the occupation. And I've had meetings with people recently who insist that that has to be a part of it. And I can understand that. But we have to remember that within all of our resistance group, our group of protesters, we have not only left-wingers, we have not only very few socialists, but even social democrats. We're not a tremendous majority in that group. There are right-wingers in the group for various reasons. Some of them
it's not a homogenic kind of
at all. No, we don't have a uniform approach about everything altogether. The only thing that is uniform is the fact that we have to end this onslaught because it's bad news. Everybody understands it. Now, some of them from the right wing are there because they just hate Netanyahu. They're absolute members of the Likud party who have left because of their hatred of Netanyahu. They said, this can't happen. This isn't the Likud. There are all sorts of issues here. So it's not homogeneous. It's very diverse and hard to say, very hard to say. I think we have to let it flow. And if the LGBTQ rights are a part of this, then okay, that has to be taken care of also. And so does the occupation, so does the cost of living and a few other things. On the other hand, that gives Netanyahu the license to say, yes, see, all they want to do is take me out of power. It's an illegitimate, anti-democratic attempt to take me out of my elected position. I won the elections. So there's validity to it. On the other hand, the country's standing still. And we really have only been fighting this main issue, which needs our full attention. We can't let our
guards down.
Right. It's bad news.
Yeah. So tell me, what do the numbers say? What are the there've been a number of surveys of late, and they always start out with in the Israeli news. They always start out with, if elections were held today, blah 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 blah.
Who would you vote?
And they do that quite often, and in the newspapers on the weekends. They also say, and no doubt that the right have lost a little bit of their clout.
No, not the right. Let's make the separation here.
Okay.
The powers within the government have lost. The right, not necessarily, because there are right-wingers who are not part of this government. Okay. It's really a matter of pro-liberal democratic or pro-theocratic, etc., who are in government. So those who are in the government on the right wing have lost. In particular, the Likud has paid a price for this positioning and the method in which they presented it. Didn't present it; they just pushed it through. This is a blitz, and so there are a lot of people there who said, wait a second, we voted for the Likud. We didn't vote for this crazy guy to push in all this kind of stuff. Wait a second. So they're losing power there, and that's showing up in the polls where power has shifted from Likud in particular. The right, the extreme right, aren't going anywhere. They're staying extreme. Those in the Likud, who are considered the moderates in this complex system, some of them have moved out to vote for the former chief of staff of the IDF, Benny Gantz, who has been kind of a amoeba, going social yet not, kind of left wing, but
chameleon.
A chameleon. He, who is the second largest party in the opposition, is now the largest party, including of anybody. He's larger than the Likud. He's larger than the largest party in the opposition, which is another single personality party of Yair Lapid. And so is Benny Gantz's party, is a personality party. Both of the two leading parties in the opposition currently are parties that are not democratic in their essence. They don't have primaries, and it's pretty much what he says goes, whoever's the leader. And the other parties in the left have kind of disintegrated. My party, Meretz, crumbled and didn't make the minimal threshold, so we're gone. We're out of the game. As it appears, we're also not able to get back in without making major changes and doing something else, calling it something else, creating something else. Labor Party is way below the minimal threshold. And what used to be my party, Meretz, if you could vote today and they throw in Meretz because that was the last election, Meretz would actually be in parliament with 5 or 6 seats. So it's very strange, but those in power have been losing it because of the way they've been doing things. Now, after this respite, after this period of the holidays, they've gained back some of their strength, but not enough. They're still the minority as far as the poll results go.
Tell me something. What we can't get away from the fact that the opposition is weak, and I'm being kind.
But weak in what way? Explain that.
Well, okay. I think it's first of all, those in Parliament, those in the Knesset are weak in their opposition, and I think that what's happened is that the real opposition to what's going on with the Likud and the judicial reform is on the street. That's the opposition.
Yep.
The people that are out on the streets, the millions, they're the ones that are calling the shots.
Yep.
Because if it was up to the opposition that is sitting in the Knesset today, I just don't see that they're totally inept in even getting themselves together and finding out what do you think the future holds?
First of all, if you're watching because you love Israel, that's one thing. I'd like you to show this to the people who don't love Israel, this upcoming segment. And that is that what Ron was referring to, when you have 170,000 people in the streets of Tel Aviv, who would have ever suspected that Israel would have the guts and the might to actually show up in force to have a demonstration in Tel Aviv alone of 200,000 people, and then another 70,000 people scattered throughout the country once? That takes a lot. 20 weeks in a row. This is amazing. If you want a great display or an example of what is people power in what is still a democracy, this is it. I mean, seriously, millions of people every week in the United States showing up every single Saturday. And in addition to that, they show up in the middle of the week when Netanyahu fired his defense minister. It was within an hour. There were 80,000 people that spilled onto the streets in Tel Aviv. Amazing. And near 200,000 people around the country. Amazing.
So how do you envision the future for the opposition? Where were they going to go? I mean, they're still kind of fledging. They don't know exactly what they're going to be doing, and I haven't seen any kind of
no great leaders come up
and no
come out of this, right?
So
what Ron is referring to or questioning is, what's the good of all of this? Let's say we even succeed and they stop their onslaught. What's going to come of it? We have history to look back at 2011. I don't know if you were there in Tel Aviv. We were in Tel Aviv in a demonstration of 400,000 people in one demonstration. And it was against the rising cost of living at the time and the manipulation of monopolies that just say, hey, we're working together on this. We're going to raise our price. So are you? Yeah. Okay, let's do it. And prices kept on going up. And the country finally raised up and revolted, and nothing came of it. Unfortunately, there were, out of the three leaders of that movement, two of them came into power. They came into politics. They came into the Labor Party. And although they were great people,
they're blown in the wind.
Yeah, they're both out. And nothing really came of that. Now we have to realize, if we have this unbelievably powerful moment in history where we have come together, left and right and center, for something very specific, we're going to have to move politically on that. I think that no matter what happens, if and when we win, and I'm pretty sure we will win, I'm an optimist, is that one of the first things that's going to have to come out of all of this is working on absolutely guaranteeing a constitution in the country, which will go against almost all of those who are in power right now, who for them there is a constitution. It's called the Bible, the Torah. As far as they're concerned, that's the only law you need. You don't need anything else. Really? We're going to start stoning people who desecrate the Sabbath? That's what it says in the Torah. I don't think we're going there. So those of us who are in this protest want a constitution to prevent something like this from happening. The current system of passing what are called basic laws doesn't hold water. And what we have to remind those who are in power right now is, I usually talk in these terms, when we regain power, we will not make you totally obsolescent. We will try to guard your rights also. You want to be ultra religious, ultra orthodox? We will guarantee you that right. We will guarantee you the right of prayer and whatever, according to what your community, even your own individual place of prayer is, whether you be Druze, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or whatever, you will have that right. And we will guard the rights of all of the minorities. And all of that stuff has to happen through a constitution where the equality among the sexes, among the people, among the colors, everything, everybody in this country has to be equal, or this is not going to be a democracy. There is no democracy where you have some people who are more protected in democracy than others. That is not democracy.
Let me throw in another question, which I thought was, because I think one of the things that freaked Netanyahu out was when the Israeli army and the elite of the Israeli army, which is the Israeli Air Force, pilots who fighter pilots that said, "Listen, we have a contract with the Israeli state that we are not going to be flying missions for a dictator."
That's right.
We're not, and that kind of like it totally
shocker.
It freaked them out. And what I want to ask you is, they're fighting these guys saying democracy, 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 and the next day they put on their uniform and they go to the occupied territories and they make sure that those that are being occupied do not have democracy. When does the we say in Hebrew, when does it click into place where all of a sudden they say to each other, "Hey, we fought for democracy, but wait, do we fight for democracy only for ourselves? Right. Or are we going to fight for democracy for those people that
are under our control,
and that we are the arm that makes sure that they are occupied?" When does that? Is that a bridge too far?
Well, there's a larger and larger presence of people who are protesting with the slogan that says, "There is no democracy with occupation." It's oxymoron. It doesn't work. So in other words, more and more people are becoming convinced that you cannot really win this struggle and then continue to occupy. So there are those forces in Israel, I wouldn't call them necessarily forces, but groups in Israel who are saying that immediately when we have the opportunity, we have to end the occupation. I'm working with someone, specifically former Deputy Chief of Staff of the IDF, Yair Golan, who together we're forming a movement. And in this movement, our first objective is to end the occupation, not only for the Palestinians, but especially for the Israelis, because of how detrimental it is to our society. We have to, first of all, get out of their faces, get out of occupied territory, very probably and even possibly according to the 67 borders or the Geneva Initiative Final Status Agreement lines, which has already been signed upon by Palestinians and Israelis, of course, with all sorts of corrections that have to what has happened since 2003 when it was signed. But how can we just continue on and say, good, we won, now we're a democracy, oh, them, well, eventually we'll take care of that? No. When is it? On June 5th? On June 5th, we will be remembering the 6-day war. And I've tried
6 days?
6 days plus 50 years. 6 days plus 50 years, it isn't over. If it were over, we would have either annexed the entire occupied territory, including Gaza, or we would have reached a settlement where we're out of it, but in a legitimate way for the benefit of all sides, not like we're out of Gaza and now we're controlling their air, their sea, and from 3 sides on the land. I'm sorry, two sides on the land. Egypt controls the south side. That isn't really ending the occupation. It's continuing the occupation in a different way. We're trying not to go in there. On the other hand, we go in there and we just send in smart rockets to go into the third floor on the left window, and boom, it goes in. Yeah, but collateral damage, people being killed, this is terrible stuff. We have to end all of this. 50 years. We're not commemorating the 6-day war. We're commemorating 50 years of a 6-day war. We're continuing. And when those 6 days are added on to June 5th, we get to June 11th, we're continuing. We're not going to be done. So this is something that has to be finished. There are people who are saying, what is it going to be worth, all of our struggle, if we don't end the occupation?
And it'd be interesting because I have not heard, maybe you have, but I have not heard of any of the Israeli fighter pilots who were there. I haven't heard any of the, and there were others, not only of the Israeli Air Force, there were others as well. But I haven't heard anyone come out and say, you know what, I understand now that I am fighting for democracy, and I can't, when I can't be a part of this anymore. I now have understood. And what's interesting is the one who has brought this movement together of now going on 21 weeks of incredible demonstrations is Benjamin Netanyahu. He's
injected us with strength and
shaken us to our core.
Yeah.
And
people who've never protested anything before are out there on the streets for the first time.
And
youth who didn't even know all of the issues, all of a sudden are out there demonstrating with us. It's fabulous.
Yeah. So we're some of us are more optimistic than others, and but we're the struggle is still here. We're gonna leave you now because we're getting on to.
Let me just comment on the one thing that you mentioned, and that is that when you're the United States or most countries in the world that are not really threatened with being overrun, it's one thing to say, I'm not going to show up and fight anymore. It's another thing where I'd say the average Israeli would assume that we are still in danger of being wiped off the map because we have neighbors who actually, if they could, they've threatened that they would do that. So that's a real issue where a pilot or even any member of the military says, I'm refusing to come anymore. Now, as important or as personal a thing that is, and one may pay deeply for actually not showing up when he's called up, that can be considered treason in these times and still in these days. The question is, obviously, if 90% of us said that, then there wouldn't be any problem anymore. We would be in the middle of it wouldn't be considered an uprising as much as it would be considered a revolution, because it's a change of thought saying, okay, I understand there are people who refuse to serve, but there are just a few of them. So it's okay. Let them not serve. I'm in favor of not putting them in prison. It's okay. That's their right to refuse to serve. That's fine. They've already done their time even. But to all of a sudden get a lot of people where it becomes really meaningful, where it actually has power to make the military say, wait a second. How are we going to fight if we're attacked? I mean, seriously, let me ask you, is there the possibility one day that we could be attacked from Gaza at the same time we could be attacked from Lebanon, at the same time there could be uprisings in the West Bank and even in the Palestinian villages within Israel? Is that a possible? It's
not only a possibility, it's probable. You know what, and I can tell you right out that the Israeli armed forces are preparing for such an event.
So if that's a scenario, a possible scenario, it's not even that far-fetched, as Ron said. How do you take these people? I mean, if we really succeed in convincing everybody it's time to refuse, because you are serving not the state of Israel, you're serving an occupation, which has been kind of subliminally put into our understanding. Because, for instance, if you just see the maps, the way they're presented on the weather report, the locations of banks across the country, the areas that are served by this rental company or another, It's the whole thing. It's Greater Israel. It's from the Mediterranean all the way to, there's no lines. And so people say, yeah, that's Israel. No, that's not Israel. That's Israel and occupied territory. Let's get it straight. The right wing would also agree. Those aren't ours yet. We should be annexing that. Okay, go ahead, try it. They can't. So there's a real issue here. It isn't going to be simple. And one of these days we may have to do that. We may have to actually organize people to, in unison, either refuse to serve or let's talk about how we finish this thing. One or the other. We have to finish. It isn't going to happen by winning militarily. The Palestinians are not going to give up either the West Bank or Gaza and say, yeah, okay, we get it. We're never going to have it. Okay, go ahead, do whatever you want. No, there's going to have to be either some action on our part to get out of the West Bank, but in a way that will still be defensible and even for the betterment also of the Palestinians, and not have it come out with the same results as Arik Sharon did in an incorrect way in Gaza, leaving scorched earth and anger and hatred against us. And eventually this thing has to come to an end. It's impossible to keep, and let's face it, between the previous mini war that we had with Gaza and the last one we just had, there were about 9 months. That was shorter than the previous one. And that was shorter than the previous one before that. In other words, we're getting down from 9 months to possibly 6 months, and then possibly, how long can half of the country be sitting in bomb shelters and be scared out of their wits, and people are dying in Gaza? And how long can that continue?
Okay, and on that happy and joyful note, what both Moshe and I would like to tell you, all of our, especially our American viewers and friends, get on the horn with your congressman. We need American pressure to help us
end it.
And so that's really the bottom line for us. Without America, we're going to be
up the old creek.
Yeah, cooked. So
let's get it straight. What we're talking about, most of us in the protests, is not just let's stop here, but rather rescind all of the things that you have pushed through only because you have the majority and can do it. Push it back. Then we'll be able to talk about how we continue, but not just let's stop here and we won't continue forward. We'll do it slowly. No, that's not good enough.
So much love to all of you, and thank you for viewing. And we'll do this again.
Good. Well, get out of here. Good man.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. Shalom ilalaka.